Before we wrap up this incredible journey, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. It always amazes me how stories like these bring people together from all around the world. Madeline. Carter had always known luxury. At 23, she was the daughter of Marcus Carter, one of California's wealthiest business tycoons. From designer clothes to first-class flights, life had always bent to her will. But what she didn't know, what she had never even considered, was what it meant to live without all of that. Her father, tired of her arrogance and disconnection from reality, had finally reached a breaking point. One morning, Madeline was called into her father's office, expecting yet another lecture she could ignore. But this time, Marcus was different, stern, quiet, serious. "Madeline," he began, looking her directly in the eyes, "if you want any part of your inheritance, if you want to remain a part of this family's legacy, you'll need to spend 1 year living on a farm. No assistance, no credit cards, no shortcuts." She blinked, thinking he must be joking. "A farm, Dad? You're sending me to a barn in the middle of nowhere." "I'm not sending you," he said calmly. "I'm giving you a choice. Live on that farm for 1 year and learn what real work is, or walk away from everything." Madeline laughed, trying to brush it off, but her father didn't budge. The conditions were clear. And the worst part? She'd have to marry a man she'd never met, a 28-year-old farmer named Elijah Brooks. It was all part of the deal. Her pride burned, but so did her fear of losing everything. That night, she stared out her penthouse window, realizing that for the first time in her life she couldn't buy her way out, so she agreed. Days later, Madeline found herself standing in a dusty field in rural Texas, her high heels sinking into the dirt. The farmhouse was small, the air smelled like hay, and Elijah, tall, rugged, and far too quiet, didn't even smile when she arrived. "So, you're the one I'm supposed to marry?" she said, arms crossed. Elijah shrugged. "Doesn't matter to me, I didn't ask for this either, but if you're here, you work. This ain't a vacation." Madeline scoffed. "Trust me, I know that." Their wedding was held on the porch of the farmhouse. No flowers, no guests, just a simple exchange of vows under the setting sun. Madeline didn't even wear makeup. She refused to call it romantic. She told herself it was just business. But as the sun dipped below the horizon and Elijah walked beside her in silence, something shifted. It wasn't love. Not yet. It was discomfort. Discomfort that maybe, just maybe, she was about to learn the biggest lesson of her life. If this story touched your heart, imagine what's coming next. Tomorrow's tale is one you won't want to miss, filled with emotion, surprises, and life-changing moments. So make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell to join us again. Until then, stay inspired and stay curious. The first morning on the farm was nothing short of a nightmare for Madeline. At 6 a.m. sharp, Elijah knocked on her bedroom door. Not politely, not gently, just 2 loud thuds and a voice that said, "Time to work." Madeline groaned, pulling the blanket over her head. "It's still dark out," she muttered. Back in Los Angeles, she wouldn't even think about getting up before 9. Elijah wasn't impressed. "Sun's been up an hour. You said you wanted to be here, now prove it." Dragging herself out of bed, she threw on the plainest clothes she could find. Jeans, a wrinkled t-shirt, and boots that felt like lead weights. No makeup, no mirror, no coffee. Her first task: clean out the horse stable. Madeline stood in shock, staring at the mess. "You expect me to touch that?" she asked, pointing at a shovel with actual manure on it. "I expect you to do your part," Elijah replied, already deep into his own work. "Nobody's above the dirt out here. Not even you, princess." She rolled her eyes but picked up the shovel anyway. After 10 minutes, her arms ached. After 20, her shoes were soaked. After 30, she'd had enough. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "I'm not cut out for this. This isn't real life." Elijah stopped what he was doing and walked over, wiping sweat from his brow. "That's your problem," he said quietly. "You think your life is the only real one, but out here this is survival. This is what keeps people alive." His words stung more than she wanted to admit. The rest of the day wasn't any easier. She tripped over a rake, spilled a bucket of water, and nearly got kicked by a cow she tried to pet like a dog. The farmhands watched her silently, not judging, just observing. Madeline could feel their eyes, and it made her skin crawl. By the time the sun began to set, she collapsed on the front porch, hands blistered, back aching. Elijah walked past her with 2 plates of food, simple grilled vegetables and cornbread. He set one down in front of her without saying a word and sat across from her. For a few minutes they ate in silence. Then, softly, Elijah said, "It gets easier. If you let it." Madeline didn't respond, not yet. Her pride wouldn't let her admit it, but something deep inside her was starting to shift. She hated the work, hated the rules, hated the dirt, but there was a strange honesty in it all. No masks, no filters. Just reality, in its rawest form. That night, lying in bed with sore muscles and the sound of crickets outside her window, Madeline whispered to herself, "1 year of this." But even as she said it, part of her wasn't sure she wanted to quit anymore. The next few days on the farm were no easier for Madeline. Elijah stuck to his word. Every morning began before sunrise, and every chore was a challenge. From hauling feed to mending fences, she found herself constantly pushed beyond anything she'd ever known. But slowly, something inside her started to change, not all at once, but like tiny cracks forming in a wall she'd built her whole life. At first, she still resisted. One afternoon, after failing miserably at moving hay bales, she stormed off and hid behind the barn. She sat in the dirt, furious and defeated. That's when Ruth, Elijah's elderly neighbor and longtime family friend, walked by carrying a basket of fresh eggs. "You okay, honey?" Ruth asked gently, setting the basket down. Madeline shrugged. "I'm fine. I don't belong here." Ruth sat beside her. "Maybe you don't. Not yet. But sometimes, where we belong isn't about where we come from. It's about where we choose to grow." Madeline didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken to her like that, soft, wise, without judgment. Later that evening, she helped Ruth in the kitchen, just chopping vegetables, nothing dramatic. But for the first time, she didn't feel useless. They laughed a little, talked about small things. It felt human. But the shift wasn't just inside Madeline. Elijah began noticing her efforts. Though he didn't say it outright, his tone softened. His glances lingered longer. One night, while they were checking on the animals, he asked, "So, why'd you agree to this?" "Really?" Madeline hesitated. "Because my father made it clear. If I didn't, he'd cut me off. I've never had to think about how to live, and until now." He nodded, not surprised. "I figured as much." She looked at him. "What about you? Why say yes to marrying someone you don't even know?" Elijah paused, leaning against a post. "Because your father offered a generous donation to rebuild the town's irrigation system. I couldn't turn it down. This farm helps feed half the county. I had to think bigger than myself." Madeline blinked, the truth hitting her like a wave. He hadn't done this for money, not even for pride. He did it for others. Later that night, as she lay in bed, her mind swirled with questions. Was she just a pawn in her father's lesson? Was Elijah suffering through this arrangement more than he let on? The air between them was still full of tension, but now it was complicated. There was a spark of respect, maybe even something else neither wanted to admit. The next morning, without being asked, Madeline got up early. She tied her hair back, put on the boots, and walked outside. Elijah, already loading feed, looked at her in surprise. "I figured I'd try not to suck at this today," she said. He gave a rare smile. "That'd be a first." Madeline rolled her eyes, but she smiled back. Something was changing. Not just between them, but within her. And the story was just getting started. Weeks passed, and while Madeline still stumbled through farm life, her resistance softened into effort. The once arrogant city girl was slowly transforming, bit by bit, chore by chore. Elijah noticed. He wouldn't admit it, but he caught himself, watching her longer than necessary, especially when she laughed while feeding the goats or wiped sweat from her brow after a long day in the fields. But peace never lasts. One dry afternoon, as the wind howled across the plains, a thin column of smoke appeared in the distance. At first it was nothing more than a wisp, but within minutes it turned into a nightmare. "Elijah!" a farmhand shouted, sprinting across the yard. "The barn's on fire!" Madeline froze. She could see it now, flames licking up the side of the old wooden structure, smoke pouring into the sky like a warning. Elijah didn't hesitate. He bolted toward the barn without a word. Madeline chased after him. Inside, chaos ruled. Animals panicked, tools clattered to the floor, and the heat was unbearable. Elijah was already inside, untying the horses, shouting commands. "Move! Get them out!" Madeline grabbed a bucket, dousing a small fire by the entrance. Her hands shook, but she kept going. She found a frightened calf tangled in a corner and fought with all her strength to free it. Her clothes caught smoke, her face blackened with ash, but she didn't stop. Not now. Together they managed to save every animal, but by the time the last one was out, the barn was gone, reduced to scorched beams and smoldering earth. The damage was done. Later that night, they sat in silence on the porch, the air still smelling of smoke. Madeline's hands were blistered, her muscles aching, but her eyes held something new, purpose. "I never imagined," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "that I'd care this much." Elijah looked at her, his own expression unreadable. "Oh, you didn't have to run into that fire." "You didn't either," she replied. A moment passed between them. Something unspoken, real. "This place," she continued, "this work, these people, it's not what I thought. I thought I was better than all of this, that I deserved more." "And now?" Elijah asked. Madeline looked out into the dark. "Now I'm not so sure I ever deserved any of it." He didn't respond, not right away. Instead, he stood, brushing soot from his jeans. "We'll rebuild. That's what we do." "I want to help," she said quickly, almost surprising herself. "Not because I have to, but because I want to." He nodded slowly. "Then we start tomorrow." Madeline exhaled, the tension in her chest finally loosening. The fire hadn't just burned the barn, it had burned away the last of her pride, and in its place, something honest was beginning to grow. The morning after the fire, the air on the farm was different. It wasn't just the scent of smoke clinging to the wind, or the sight of the scorched remains of the barn. It was the silence, thick with reflection, heavy with questions. Madeline stood barefoot on the porch, holding a mug of lukewarm coffee, watching Elijah walk the fence line. He looked more tired than she'd ever seen him, yet his steps were steady, determined. Rebuilding wasn't just necessary, it was symbolic. "I want to help rebuild the barn," she said that afternoon, stepping beside him with her sleeves already rolled up. Elijah gave her a curious glance, then nodded. No words were needed. The following weeks blurred into hard labor, sweat, and honest work. Madeline no longer avoided the mud, nor did she complain when her back ached. Every nail hammered, every board lifted. She was all in, and people noticed. Ruth, the kind neighbor who once called her the spoiled city girl, handed her a basket of wildflowers one evening. "You've changed, dear. I see it in your eyes. That fire burned more than wood, didn't it?" Madeline smiled softly. "It burned away who I thought I was." But just as she began to feel grounded in this new life, the past came roaring. Back, this time in a polished black sedan. Her father. It had been months since she last heard from Richard Cross, the man who once controlled every part of her future. He stepped out in a tailored suit that looked absurd against the dusty backdrop of the farm. His eyes scanned the fields, then locked onto Madeline. "We need to talk," he said, his voice firm but not cold. They walked toward the edge of the property, tension building with each step. "I've been watching from a distance," he admitted, folding his arms. "I didn't expect you to last here, but I was wrong. You've proven yourself, and I'm ready to bring you back. Into the company, the city, everything you walked away from." Madeline's heart pounded. Old wounds itched beneath fresh skin. "I'm not the same person you sent away," she replied. "This place, these people, Elijah, they taught me what real value is." Richard frowned. "So you're staying? Giving up everything for a farmer?" She met his eyes with clarity. No, I'm gaining everything by finally choosing for myself. He said nothing, just nodded, turned, and left. That evening, Elijah found her by the barn, the sky painted in golden hues. "Everything okay?" he asked gently. Madeline smiled, slipping her hand into his. "I chose this life, and I choose you." They stood there as the sun dipped behind the hills, two people who started as strangers, brought together by a contract neither of them wanted, but transformed by a love neither of them saw coming. And this time there were no conditions, no expectations, just freedom, just truth, just them. Thank you for watching this emotional journey of Madeline and Elijah, two strangers forced together by circumstance, only to discover something neither expected: true love and purpose. Now we want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a moment that changed everything? A time when life forced you out of your comfort zone only to reveal your true strength? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to read where you're watching from and how this story made you feel. Did Madeline make the right choice, leaving behind a life of wealth for something more meaningful? Would you have chosen the same path if it meant giving up everything you once knew? Your voice matters here. So don't just scroll. Take a second to comment below and let us know what part of the story touched you the most. We read every message, and if you're enjoying these heartwarming tales that remind us of life's deeper meanings, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. We've got another powerful story coming your way tomorrow, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Until then, stay kind, stay real, and keep believing in second chances.